right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back. We've been gone for the last couple of weeks, but we're here. Yay. I'm sure you're all so very happy to see my smiling face again. Because you just watched The Polypifer's Tale, and you didn't see my face in that. So now you get to see it. Huzzah. Okie dokie. All right. Hello, everyone. Joining us today, we have a special guest. It's not Dapper Dinosaur this time. We have Matt Dillahunty. Welcome, welcome.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, good. And we also have Nestlig, who is one of my editors. He edits and reviews my scripts before we turn them into videos.
Hello, everyone.
Look a little sunburn.
No, that's natural.
He's a Sith, you see, a Dark Lord of the Sith. And then we have our producer, Peter. He's in the background. He'll be around. He's our all-seeing eye. And so, hello. We got a bunch of people. Kalasia, Unapologetically Christy, Dragon Spartan 90 Official, Katina Pack Bays. Hello, welcome. Okay, so today we got a show for you guys about the history, a little bit of the history of the YouTube skepticism, internet skepticism, TMCR movement. And we have today with us someone who has been around for, you've been part of it. You've been a major member in the internet skeptic movement for almost 2 decades.
More than that, but
okay.
Yeah. Although it depends, because I'm a skeptic, I'm an atheist, I'm a humanist.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how the communities are divided up and which ones I might be considered an active part of and not an active. It's really weird.
Oh, we'll definitely get it. We'll dig into all that. I'm excited because I think there have been some very intriguing shifts in the thought processes of the skeptic movement and how that's sort of gone down separate paths. And we'll definitely get into all that. So, out of curiosity, I've been watching you since like a little while, since I was in...
It's okay. I'm old. I've done this a long time. You're not going to make me feel any older than I do right now. And in part, for people who've seen me before and are like, who the hell's that dude? We just did a fundraiser for recovering from religion. And I said, if we raised $75,000, I would shave off my beard and wear just a mustache, which I despise, for a whole month. So that's why I look different and weird.
I think it looks fine. You know, I'm a big fan. The mustache is the only thing that really, the mustache and down here is the only thing that comes in. The sides don't come in very well for me, but yours looks very good.
Thank you.
When you do I believe I first started watching you when I was in like middle school, early middle school. And so I was a fan of the Atheist Experience. That's where I believe I first saw like you, Aaron. You actually put me on to Steve Shive's stuff. You mentioned him in a show once, and that was because he used to, I don't know, maybe he still does. I haven't watched his stuff in a long time. He used to do a thing where he would read apologetics books. He'd go through them line by line by line, and debunk them and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, so when exactly did like the Atheist Experience call-in show? When did that happen? When did that start?
Well, AXP actually started long before I was involved, and possibly, and before I was even an atheist, I think they were starting to do it. But after 9/11, or around 9/11, before that, actually, I lost my job, and then after that's when I kind of transitioned out, and then in around 2004 or so, I found the Atheist Experience. I lived in Austin, and it was here. And Jeff D, who was one of the original hosts, actually lived in the same apartment complex that I lived in, and I didn't know it. And he put a flyer up on the mailbox, and I'd heard about the show. And so I tuned in one day, watched. I called in. I went to the after show dinner. And then the next week I was down there screening calls behind the scenes. And a couple months later, I filled in as a guest host because I'd written an article about the 10 Commandments monument cases. And Then shortly after that, I was a regular host, and then the main host and the president of the organization and all that.
Okay. Are you familiar with a YouTube channel called Big Joel?
I might be. The name doesn't ring a bell, but
he did a video, this is a number of years ago now, but on, you mentioned the 10 Commandment monument cases. He did a really interesting video on that whole saga, kind of putting it all into perspective. For anyone if you don't watch Big Joel, I highly recommend. His stuff's really good. He did a video recently. He's not like a skeptic YouTuber per se. He's more of a media analyst kind of guy.
He's more in the breadtuber sphere, I would
say. So he
Yeah.
does like a lot of like leftist like a critique of like content or and of media, and he did one he did one recently though on the God's Not Dead series, which is 5 movies now, by the way. I didn't know that. Can you believe it's 5 movies?
That's 4 more than I watched.
Yeah, the first one was actually filmed at LSU Baton Rouge, which is where I went the first couple of years of my college experience. And so I thought that was kind of funny. Did not see Kevin Sorbo there while I was there, but anyway. Okay, so so in that kind of early sort of primordial stage of the YouTube experience, there were it seemed like there were rather few really big like anti-creationist, anti-religion channels. There was like there was Aaron, there was like Dark Matter 2525, Kate Farr, who's still around and still does stuff. And so out of that, TJ Kirk, the Amazing Atheist, I don't know what he does nowadays, if he still does YouTube, but those were kind of the like some of the early members of
the pioneers, so to speak.
Yeah. And so something that kind of struck me as interesting the more I've kind of thought about the skeptic movement, whatever you want to call it, in the context of like our political context, our socio-historical context, whatever you want to call it, is we've kind of the movement, it seemed, at least major elements of it seemed kind of contrarian to whoever the major political party was, at least through the Bush years and then through the Obama years. Do you think that is kind of fair? So like we had the major anti-evangelical push during the Bush years. We had the 4 horsemen of atheism, and then during the Obama years, we had a switch from like fighting right-wingers and evangelicalism to a lot of people jumped on the anti-feminism, anti-SJW sort of train. What do you think about that?
Well, I'll let Matt first respond. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm following, because so the atheist experience was on public access and not on YouTube, and then we switched to YouTube, and we had the nonprofit show was primarily political, but the larger, I don't know, it's hard to describe, because there were some of us who, I mean, we didn't switch from being focused on creationism to being anti-feminist. I mean, that was never a role that any of us
not
took,
you guys per se.
No.
But there were a lot of YouTube skeptics, etc.
Yeah,
who were like
skepticism.
Like
that transition happened around 2014, right? Like around that time.
So like late in the Obama years.
Late Obama years, yes.
Yeah, it seemed like there was a switch from, not you guys per se, but in the sort of the zeitgeist of the atheist movement, it seemed that there was a switch from this anti-right-wing, anti-evangelical stuff towards a lot more people arguing against, like saying like, oh, feminism is bad, SJWs are bad. Like you had Armored Skeptic, you had
you're talking about people who aren't skeptics, like Armored Skeptic and TJ. You're talking about people who aren't humanists and who aren't a part of any of the community stuff.
Right.
So there's the atheist YouTubers. Despite the fact that I have my own YouTube channel with couple 100,000 subscribers, and then several channels I work with that have lots of subscribers. I've never considered myself a YouTuber. I'm,
Okay.
we were producing content and then just also posting it on YouTube. But I know who you're talking about. And they were the ones who were at the, Mythicist Milwaukee convention, parading around just and listening to Sargon and all that crap. When those people aren't humanists, they're not skeptics, and I don't know how many of them are even atheists, but they're not following the science or anything. They're just reacting to. Here's the thing that gets me clicks, and if I say feminism is cancer, all of a sudden I get more views, just like people are. Yes, so now I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, I agree.
I used to call these people, instead of the skeptic community, I refer to them as the septic community, because it's nothing but like a septic tank. It's nothing but crap floating around all over.
No, I was actually at an event with Sargon. We sat down next to each other, and a couple of people were standing around in front of us. And he started off really weird, and then got normal, and then got super weird, because he was like, oh, hey, it doesn't matter which of us has more subscribers. And I was like, that's a really weird thing to start with, because you're right. The subscriber count's irrelevant to which one of us is right.
Right.
And then we talked about philosophy in general, and we were kind of on the same page for a while. And then he went down the rabbit hole into the anti-SJW stuff. And there were guys standing in front of us, and when I pointed out the flaws in his thinking, I shit you not, he looked at me and just said, well, I have more subscribers than you, and walked off.
Okay.
And that's all he cares about. It's nothing else. Yeah.
I believe you had because you also had a debate or discussion, whatever, at some point with Armored Skeptic way back when he.
No, he was at the same event.
Oh, okay.
With I think Shu.
Yeah, they used to date. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Just anyway, we had a conversation at that same event. I was there to moderate a debate between Bob Price and Bart Ehrman.
Oh, okay.
And because that was leading up to the 2016 thing, because Bob Price is a Trump supporter,
right?
And a mythicist, and so.
And he's very pro. Oh shoot, the guy who wrote Cthulhu, but in all the wrong ways.
Oh yes, he said a number of terrible racist things in addition to his other stuff. Yes.
Oh my gosh, what is his name? I'm completely drawing a blank right now. Oh my gosh,
guy who wrote Cthulhu.
Yeah. Oh my god, how am I doing?
I'm blanking too, because this has turned into a hey, let's call out everybody who was
Lovecraft. Lovecraft. There we go. Good lord.
Thank you, Mark Reed.
Oh my goodness. Well, there's a point I'm going somewhere with it. Do you think that there is any? Do you think that there is a relationship between the cultural, I guess, position on so there were a lot of evangelical, movements that were kind of blossoming in the early 2000s, and famously Richard Dawkins tried to write a book about atheism in the late 90s, but his producer or maybe producer not the right word, but anyway, his manager, whatever, was it's not really a good time to do it. And then right after Bush came into office, the guy was like, okay, now it's the time to write this sort of thing. Do you think that there was a parallel, intentionally or otherwise, between this there's lots of conservatism, and so you have this big pushback from evangelicalism, but then there was a liberal president, and so there was a pushback against a lot of more liberal ideas? Do you think that had anything to do with it, or just no?
I think the bigger issue was 9/11.
Okay, that's fair.
It's basically what happened with 9/11 and the aftermath and the Muslim panic, Islamophobia, all that stuff.
Right.
That's basically what inspired Sam to write his first book, The End of Faith.
Okay.
And when Sam and I talked about it when we were on tour for a while, and I remember him telling me that was the moment. It was like there were things that he'd always known and cared about and everything else, but this was like an eye-opening event of, oh wait, it's not just you know, some kooky esoteric thing. There's real danger here.
Right.
And he felt the need to address it, and good for him. And it was the right time for a lot of people to start talking about religious threats. And I think one of the things that we kind of, you know, granted, I'm not involved in that. I didn't publish a book then or anything. One of the disservices we did is we built a bigger community, incredibly active, focused on opposition to religion. And I've said before, I'll repeat this many times. The skeptic community isn't atheistic enough to suit me. That's just a matter of personal preference. They spend time on homeopathy and, you know, psychics and palm readers and Bigfoot and all that stuff. When I think the biggest elephant in the room for skepticism to address is religion. And for a while there was, you know, even people running the JREF, not Randy, but others, were saying, hey, you know, religion is untestable and therefore skepticism has nothing to say about it. And I was like, oh, yes, it does. Skepticism's position on the untestable is that by virtue of it being untestable, you cannot have evidential warrant to believe it.
The non-overlapping magisteria kind of stuff.
Yeah, religion is unbelievable by virtue of it being untestable. And so that was just a personal preference. I'm still, you know, part of the skeptic community. I work with them on a number of different things. I have, you know, friends from Randy on down. But the atheist community has never been skeptical enough to suit me. And that's not just a personal preference. That's a source of complete embarrassment. There are people out there who just, I don't like religion. And so they're going to donate to and contribute and support whoever seems to be the loudest voice yelling about religion or mocking religion and all this. And so it's like they're paying somebody else to basically do their homework for them. And there are individuals out there now who, I mean, I mentioned the other day, there's some Mormon content producers who are brilliant scientists. I'm fans of a number of them. Clint from Clint's Reptile is a Mormon, but he's a zoologist. And I have a reptile business. I work with 20 species of snakes and 11 species of lizards. And we watch Clint. I love Clint. I'd love to talk to him about his Mormonism. But the same thing's true for like Dan McClellan. Dan McClellan's a Bible scholar. And the atheist community just loves Dan and is promoting him left and right and buying his books. Meanwhile, 10% of everything you give him is going straight to the Mormon church. And that's not always addressed. And I'm like, I would like that. I'm not saying atheists shouldn't work with people who we disagree with. Of course we should.
Absolutely.
But there is a difference between being anti-religion and then propping up whoever and whatever is out there saying the stuff that you're too lazy to bother studying yourself, and actually getting involved and having an understanding of this and addressing it with rigor and intellectual honesty. And I wish I'd see more of that in the atheist community, but
I think that's an interesting perspective. Yeah. I'd never really considered it that way. And I didn't know that about like Dan McClellan, for instance. I follow him on Twitter and I
love him. I think he's great on that. And yet I'm personally baffled. But I'm baffled every day. I don't understand the world I'm living in. I don't understand how Trump is president. I don't understand how there's so much science denial. I don't understand why the truth doesn't matter. I don't understand why the, fuck your feelings crowd seem more interested in antagonizing and making people upset and impacting their feelings than addressing the actual facts and, intellectual rigor. But I'm weird.
Oh, well, I mean, I think I do think that's an interesting way to look at that. I didn't really have anything. That's interesting. I'll have to think about that.
Anyway, I fast forwarded. You were asking about how all this got started with. And I was like, I think 9/11 was more.
Okay, that's. Yeah, I mean that is interesting, and that's something I'll have to ponder on because I really had never thought about it that way. But I think you're right. I myself, I am an atheist, but my content is really all like science communication stuff, or at least it has been up to this point. I've done a few videos here and there where I've talked about religious stuff. Like we did a video, all of us here, we did a video on the supposed miracles at Lourdes, France. We
Right.
went through papers that talked about the claims of people who had been healed or allegedly healed. We went through like documentation of like what is the process by which the local doctors and then the church evaluates the claims of like miracles and whatnot. And the funny thing about that is when you actually read the papers, the historical work on it, all the work that reporters and historians have done, is actually the number of miracles decreases with time. So it's not like just every day a new person gets healed. It's like there were a bunch of people in the 1800s, and then like it's kind of just dropped lower and lower and lower, and then now like the last person who the church said like had actually been healed by the waters was like back in 2008, like years ago. But if you look at older records, it's like every year there's dozens of people. And so it's kind of funny, like I think that's a really interesting phenomenon. And I think you're right. Like I don't really see many people talking about that sort of stuff. I'd love to do more work on this,
perhaps miracles are
like
becoming less effective with climate change. There's a possibility.
Perhaps it's too warm for miracles. Yes. So
God's just busy now.
I love the fact that they closed down the world when the pandemic hit. That kind of gave the game away a little.
Yeah.
You think that'd be the perfect time
Yes.
to have it open? Okay. So, all right. Well, that's interesting. So, okay. Given that, so in that case, I'm curious then on why did in your mind, why do you think that there was such a big shift in terms of the talking points in the skeptic community from more anti-religious stuff? There was this big shift in the early 2010s to like anti-feminism, anti-SJW stuff. What do you think was sort of the impetus for that?
Well, I think that we attracted a lot of atheists, and atheists don't necessarily share the same beliefs in other areas. So you can be opposed to God claims, and one of the political things that I went back and forth and around with people about was libertarianism.
Right.
And so I have a number of friends and associates, like, I mean, even if you look at like Penn Jillette, he'll tell you he's a batshit crazy libertarian. And when you're willing to say something like that, you got to kind of wonder, what exactly are you talking about? What is the main thing that you're claiming? And in his case, it is often, and I shouldn't say this about at Penn specifically. The problem I have often with libertarians is very much I got mine, screw you if you can't get yours. Let me take advantage of everybody who's contributed to the state to build roads and all this other stuff. And now that we've got it, let's eliminate all of it because I'll be fine. It is quite often in my neophyte presentation here, a position of massive privilege.
Yeah.
And because of that, there's a contingent of the libertarian wing, and they're not all batshit crazy, but there's a contingent of them that are definitely atheists. And they want, they don't care about social progress, social justice, helping the downtrodden or anything else. It's very much you should only get exactly what you deserve and nothing else, as if they all got exactly what they deserved and nothing else, which is bizarre. Nobody gets where they are on their own. And I saw that, and that started with when people were starting to get more woke, I suppose. And you had Gamergate, and you had Elevator Gate. This was a case in particular with Rebecca, who I haven't talked to her in a while. I'm assuming Rebecca and I are still friends, and even if we're not, I adore her.
Rebecca Watson, right?
Yes, we don't interact much. But when she, when Elevator Gate happened, it was very much a simple thing of, hey guys, don't do that. there was a lot of discussion of why are women generally underrepresented in the secular community, in the atheist community.
So shocking.
Because it had been just a dudes club.
Right. Yeah. I was like, oh, it's such a mystery, you know, when Elevator Gate happens.
Can I give my input on this, because I have also it's just my opinion, but I think you also mentioned 9/11 as one major influence on the people's feelings and such, but I also think that the 2008 financial crisis also had an impact on people as well. So what I believe happened was you have a large group of mostly white, mostly young men who are really in the shit, basically. And they see other demographics making a lot of progress, like you mentioned the LGBT Jackson and such. So they felt left behind, basically. And so they sought out a community that threw them in. And one of those communities was the so-called Skeptic community. And that's how they went into the community. But they also brought with them all these negative feelings about feminism and somewhat even gay people as well.
Yeah. And you know, when Elevator Gate happened, what you had was a group of guys who, let's be honest, there's a contingent of atheists for whom Hitchens is a hero and Dawkins is a hero and the Horsemen are heroes. And so their perception is these guys are our champions. They're out there doing the work that I want to stand up against religion. And people don't put much more thought in it beyond that. And so when Rebecca complained mildly about somebody basically hitting on her in an elevator,
being trapped with some random guy.
After clearly identifying, you know, she was done, she was going to bed, and this dude kind of followed her after hovering, and all she said was, guys, don't do that. And then Dawkins made his shitty post, you know, with his fallacy of relative privation, where it's like, oh no, how dare someone hit on you in an elevator when you know, oh, there's people over here suffering female genital mutilation, how dare you comment on anything
not as bad as fallacy.
And then a bunch of us were like, that was really shitty, Richard. And there was a backlash from that. And the nice thing is, I've said this over and over again, I've been in the atheist community for a long time now, and one nice thing about schisms in the community is that it shows that we're growing and making progress, because there won't be schisms unless you're in a situation where people think they can still have a community even after dividing it. So the community has to reach a certain size and a certain level of complexity before there can be a legit split. And so you have fighting with at American Atheists that leads to American Atheists and Atheist Alliance International, and then Atheist Alliance International, there's fighting or problems between those, and you end up with AAI and AAA. And then it's, you know, I've had a falling out with, I don't know, half a dozen people. Dawkins is posting transphobic shit now, and it's just wild.
That's maybe we'll get into that towards the end. But yeah, you're right. It is interesting. Again, that idea of we have matured as a group, therefore we have to kind of reevaluate what our ideals are and where we stand on different issues. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I'll tell you a little bit about my background. I say this with, you know, some degree of ignominy. I was also I was a member of the whole, I wasn't really a member, I was a watcher of the armored skeptic stuff back in the day, a lot of the anti-SJW stuff, anti-feminist stuff. I got caught up in that when I was in high school, because I didn't know any better. And I never really thought too much about it. It is exactly as you said. I agreed with Armored Skeptic when he fought with creationists. You know, when he did a video about Ray Comfort, I watched that and I was like, yeah, I know a tiny bit about evolution, so I agree with this. And then when he was, you know, reading an article about how making fun of systemic injustice or whatever, then I was also like, oh, well, I agree with him on this other thing, so that he must be right about this also. And it wasn't until my first year of college. I don't know if you're familiar with the channel Shaun, Shaun.
Nope.
Oh yeah, the one with the skull and
Yeah,
sunglasses.
his channel or his videos are very
Long and detailed. Yeah.
well, I mean, they're very well done. But the actual like the art behind it is very very minimalist. It'll literally be just like his little skull picture, and like that's it. That's the except when he shows like either a little video or an article title.
References. Like,
Yeah, except for when he shows references.
Same background. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just kind of him. It's almost like a podcast, really. But I watched one of his, I think his first like million view video was how PragerU lies to you, which came out in 2016 when I had just gone to when I had just gotten into college, and I watched that, and that really caused me to be like, oh, hey, maybe I'm on the wrong side of all this, you know. But at any rate, so I was and now I don't even know what the heck Armored Skeptic's doing. It's like the weird conspiracy theory stuff. It's very weird. But I didn't have that. I guess I didn't really have the thought that like maybe I'm wrong about this until I had somebody who was, alike enough to me on most issues, but dissimilar on certain ones, that gave me the pushback, and I was like, oh, hey, I guess I do need to reevaluate what I think.
I had something similar happening as well. Like I didn't follow Armored Skeptic much. I did follow Thunderfoot a lot because I really
that's another one.
I still like his science videos. They're awesome. Whenever he does science videos, they are always good. Nowadays he is more into hating Elon Musk, and I get it. But sometimes there's a point when you can repeat the same thing over and over again. So Thunderfoot really needs to. I really want him to just do more science videos. Those are good. But back in 2016 or 14 or such, he was really his hate target was. Also, her name again, Anita Sarkeesian, I believe.
Oh yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I've forgotten about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was pretty much convinced by his videos, and I didn't really question it and such. And the only opposing view that I got was from Aaron Raw. Like a long time ago, he did a public talk on not specifically on feminism, but he did mention feminism in that talk, and he got a lot of pushback from that as well. But that shocked me basically. So this is the first time I heard an pro-feminist view among the so-called atheism and skepticism and such, the skeptic sphere basically. And that was the first moment when I actually began to look more deeply into the arguments about feminism and such, and then I became more progressive with regard to this. Yeah.
Suffice to say, it's that sort of pipeline of like skeptic to anti-feminist ensnared a lot of people, and it there was definitely that schism. Because you had you had PZ writing about like how stupid a lot of the anti-feminist stuff was, and then there was, and then to get to the next question I have, it appears to me that schism kind of evaporated really quickly, and I've noticed this about a lot of movements. A bunch of movements all kind of evaporated, or at least became a lot quieter right around the time that Trump was first inaugurated. And I'm not entirely sure. I have a hypothesis for why this is the case, but but a lot of the people, it seemed to me, who were on the anti-feminist train all moved into or a bunch of them, not all of them, of course, but a bunch of them moved into right-wing politics.
Yes.
Whereas the people who were the more left-wing or at the very least centrist continued on with the atheism science communicator content. But alongside,
I don't think they moved.
Okay.
So I think the ones that you would say, oh, these people are moving to the right wing, were always right wing.
Okay.
Yeah.
But they were surrounded in the atheist community, and the focus of church-state separation, the focus of opposing religious privilege, took priority So they shelter their politics. And so as somebody, I ran the atheist community of Austin for a number of years. I'm on the board of directors for American Atheist. One of the former presidents of American Atheists kept trying to get us and did in fact go to CPAC, we need to reach out to these conservative atheists.
Okay.
And I'm like, why?
Yeah.
So atheism isn't my only mission, and it isn't even my first mission. It's just the one that I focus on more because that's where my expertise kind of comes out. But skepticism and humanism are far more important because that's how you get to atheism and how you make atheism better, respectively. And so when the president of American Atheists, the previous one that we fired, was trying to get us to go to CPAC and did, some of us were sitting there going, this is kind of weird. And then there were discussions about, hey, we are having so many conventions. We need to make sure that we have policies in place for how to deal with harassment or problem things, or, what are the rules going to be?
Right.
And there were left-leaning woke people who were producing rules and advocating for, ethics committees. And if you're at a convention and somebody comes up to you and, harasses you or won't leave you alone or is being awkward, because let's be honest, one of the things that we skip past quite often is that a good percentage of the people who are active in these secular communities are fucking weird. And that includes me and other people. It's not just, somebody's on the spectrum or whatever else. We are quite often surrounded by oddballs. And usually it's great because the way in which you're weird might go really well with the way in which I'm weird. However, at some point it becomes, how Joe Rogan is an idiot who will believe whatever the smartest person in front of him tells him.
Right.
And runs with it. And then he goes and supports Trump. And now he's figuring out evidently that, Trump might not have been honest. Yeah, Joe, imagine that. The weirdness takes us a backseat to people who want to not be challenged for their bad ideas and their bad behavior. And so they want to go up and be inappropriate. I mean, I toured with Lawrence Krauss and Sam Harris, and Sam Harris made the decision, he told me afterwards, and I was on board with it, to kick Krauss off the tour because of allegations of him inappropriately touching people. Right. There was a bunch of that. And in the same way that Musk wants, comedy's legal again. Comedy was never not legal. Well, that's good. Let's react to Me Too. Me Too is a good thing. Pointing out how people have been systematically victimized by systems of privilege and dudes being able to do whatever they want, and just dismissing it as, well, you got to grow up, little girl. It's time to, if you're going to run with the big boys, you got to put up with this stuff. All of that mentality had been building. And what people saw is when they started going to conventions, all of a sudden, wow, these are being decent places. And people were getting called out for being inappropriate. I'm as sex positive as you can get, but let me tell you, every scandal that hit the secular community fit in exactly two categories: sex and money. Somebody was stealing, or somebody was having sex with somebody that they shouldn't have, or trying to have sex with somebody they shouldn't. And it's like, okay, there were some people who were just like, I don't get to have any fun anymore if I can't, flirt or if I go down and I have a drink at the bar or whatever, and I get a little say the wrong thing, all of a sudden whoever I said it to is going to go talk to them. I'm just going to get canceled. There's no such thing as cancel culture. What there is accountability culture. Right. If you say and do things, there are consequences.
Right.
It's simple. And so a lot of these people were already very right-leaning. And when Silverman got fired, he joined up with some people creating, I think it's like Atheists for Liberty or whatever.
Okay.
And then you watch and you see Ayaan Hirsi Ali joins a right-wing think tank. Now is a Christian, but isn't a Christian because she's convinced that it's true. She's a Christian because she's convinced it's convenient and useful. Apostate Prophet is now a Christian as well. He's somebody I've done shows with. I called him out for pretending to be skeptical while then advocating for faith-based position. It is, and he's still on the advisory board for Atheist Alliance International. And I mean, there's all this stuff going on. There's not a cohesive secular community. There's not a cohesive atheist community. I'm not sure that the skeptic community exists in any strong way. It has diminished in its public-facing presence since Randy died. And so I'm not sure whether or not that's a bad thing, because from my perspective, the world is so broken and weird right now that skepticism and humanism are always more needed than atheism. And I think atheism just proceeds naturally from that.
Okay.
But we're so broken that most of what I talk about, I mean, I'm debating a Christian on Saturday on my channel. But I haven't been doing as many debates with Christians. I still do the call-in shows. Instead, I'm engaging with atheists and right-leaning atheists who are really opposed. And the right turned trans folks, this tiny portion of the population, into the biggest boogeyman in history in order to manipulate everybody, no matter where you are in the political spectrum, by misrepresenting the facts, lying, and labeling. Anyway, that was a long sermon. I don't even remember what the question was.
Oh, that's okay.
Oh, you're the guest. So
yeah, you're the guest. We
Yeah.
want to hear what you have to say. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
I 100% agree. I do think that the skeptic community, as it has existed in the past, has really fractured into a million pieces. But the and the trans bit, I think, also is very true. We at some point in the BreadTube article, I think we'll do a video, about how trans people are unfairly demonized, and how silly the panic about them is. But the question that I initially asked was, although I did like your answer, I thought it was interesting. So it seemed like a lot of movements kind of shattered or evaporated right around the time that Trump got elected. Do you think that there's any sort of link there? Or any do you think there's like a broader political issue that was sort of top down, causing these smaller movements to kind of break down, or what do you think about that?
No, it was absolutely empowering when people who want to behave shitty without consequences see someone blatantly doing that and getting rewarded by becoming president. All it does is empower more of them.
Yeah, I think you're right. The other thing I had said, so like other movements, I feel have also gone by the wayside since his election. So like I remember seeing people talk about like the Free the Nipple campaign, for instance, which is all about like body positivity, or about the body positivity campaign, the things like it's, you don't have to be rail thin and all this sort of stuff. And it seemed like a lot of those movements also really got a lot quieter, or all kind of around the same time. And I do wonder if that was also my hypothesis for that. I could be wrong. I'm interested to hear your response. Is that the sort of natural like status quo order was very upset by Trump, and so all these movements that did kind of exist had to kind of fall back to other like issues, because they felt that the tide had kind of turned against them in terms of the political zeitgeist. What do you think I'm wrong, or what do you think?
I don't know.
Okay, because that's just something I think I've seen. I could be wrong, but it just seemed to me that there's a really good book by Timothy Snyder. It's called On Tyranny, and it was about the first Trump administration. I don't know if it's a really short book. If you haven't read it, it's quite good. But he talks about the parallels between like fascist regimes of the 30s and 40s against like Putin today, as well as Trump. And like I think the Enzo Traverso uses the term post-fascism to kind of describe these movements, which I think it kind of maps onto to them a bit better than just straight fascism. But the point of it is that it seemed to me that these movements had to kind of, or that a lot of movements that were more kind of liberal had to kind of close ranks around certain issues like abortion, for instance, because Trump put in multiple justices, which made the court conservative, made the Supreme Court conservative, and then we lost like Roe, for instance. And it seemed like he had that kind of effect on a lot of things, even if it wasn't directly because he was putting people in charge. But it was, as you said, he was empowering people to go on the offensive more, and that gave them the ability to kind of fight back against some of these movements that were more sort of liberal. Is at least what it seems to me.
I haven't read that, but that's also not something that I would ever read or give a shit about. Not to slide it, but it's all of these. Ooh, let's look back at history and find a way to categorize and label what's going on. I don't give a shit. I don't care what kind of labels somebody's going to put on something. I care what it actually is. And I think the modern world is so incredibly different from any other fascist, oligarchic era and regime anywhere. I don't know what good it does to talk about, ooh, this is like a post-fascist regime. Okay, whatever. You know what I do care about is what's actually happening and whether it's happened before or not. Now, if there's some lesson that we can learn from history that to prevent it from going further, but in the past, you didn't have the internet, you didn't have Twitter, you didn't have you had, for example, if you go back to 100 and some odd years ago when the KKK was remotely relevant, you'd have newspaper articles about them, and you'd have stories, and people knew somebody who knew somebody, and you'd hear about a lynching, you'd hear about something else. Then we got better and basically shamed them into not quite non-existence, but there was a period of time where the KKK went down to like 3,000 members, like nationally. And yet, here, you want to know the difference between the right and the left. Left-wing organizations still supported free speech by allowing the KKK to meet, because that's what the Constitution allows. You don't just get to decide that because somebody doesn't think like you, that they don't, that they lose those rights.
Right.
Big shock.
Then the right does the opposite now, which is, it's something, it is not outside the realm of possibility that you and I will no longer be able to produce content at some point in the next 10 years. That the platforms will shut us down, or they'll, just delist us, or, however they want to do it. It's control the narrative and everything else. And so I don't like sitting around reading books from historians who are like, oh, here's a way to look at what's going on and understand it in the view of history. Couldn't possibly interest me less. Not for the people who are interested in it and get something out of it and find value. Great. I want them to do that, But what about today is similar enough to the past that analyzing the past is relevant, because we have set aside due process, the rule of law. The Supreme Court has ruled that Trump is, or the president is basically king, as long as he's doing, official duties. The Trump administration is now working with Project 2025. They are appointing people who are the dumbest, most dishonest, and least qualified individuals to do anything and everything, from having a wackadoodle woo-meister in charge of health and human services to having Kristi Noem in charge of Homeland Security. She doesn't even know what habeas corpus is, actually defined it as the opposite of what it is. And so we have this. There's never been anything like this. What's that?
I was laughing, but I shouldn't be laughing.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's just we've never had anything like this. And so even if we could point back at some point in the past and say, turns out the United States is an exact copy of Germany in this particular year, or this regime in this particular year, would that tell us what we need to do to change it? Because the world is so much different. In the same way that we didn't have, the Tim Pool, Charlie Kirk, Elon Musk, Twitter supporting all the lies. lies move quicker now and are more instantly and thoroughly believed and shared than at any time in history. And so we're almost post-truth rather than just post-fascist.
Yeah, like the online social media is just Plato's cave at this point. It always has been actually. So, but it's more true now than ever.
I only use social media to advertise stuff like this. Like when I was coming on here, I posted to Twitter and Facebook, and it's about the only posts I do anymore.
Oh, we appreciate that. Okay. So I don't know. I mean, I think you're right. I think that there are ups and downs to the historical analysis, but another issue I'm curious about is, I think we've kind of alluded to this already. Do you think that the more rightward skeptics helped funnel a lot of people into other like into the like a broader conservative project, because like you had some like self-styled conservative or skeptical people, like you go from watching someone like an armored skeptic who's like, okay, feminism bad, and then you hear like Jordan Peterson or Gad Saad or someone talking about like, yes, feminism bad, and also here's these other sort of moral prescriptions that we need to add on top of that. Yeah. And then like that kind of gets them into this broader array of conservative thinkers. Do you think that happens like a lot, or not really?
I don't know, and I don't know how much people's minds are changing versus people are empowered to stop pretending.
Okay.
And I genuinely don't know, because I do know that people can and do change. As a former fundamentalist Christian, duh. On the other hand, how common is that? Because in the 20 years that I've been talking to people about this stuff, there are people who've changed their mind on religion and religious issues a number of different times. And then there's 1,000, for every one person whose mind changes, 1,000 other people who heard me say the same things and they never changed their mind one bit.
Yeah, that's true. I'm curious. It seems that more people have been talking about. I have one friend in particular, Dan Stern Cardinal, who I think was the first person I kind of heard talk about this, but Genetically Modified Skeptic did a video about it fairly recently, which is often called like the AltRight the Skeptic to AltRight pipeline, because you had a lot of people who were in the people we were talking about earlier who are in the skeptic community, but are the anti-feminists, anti-SJWs who refer to themselves as the alt-right. And I think that does also dovetail very nicely with like the libertarian movement, for instance, which was something I completely forgot about. But that's another one that like I've heard some of the left-wing secular people I follow were also caught up in like the libertarian stuff, the right-wing libertarian stuff in the early 2000s, but then kind of got out of that later. That's something I had completely forgotten about.
I don't know.
Okay, that's fair. I'm curious. I wish that someone out there would write a book on the like skepticism to alt-right pipeline. Somebody, if you're not already on that, somebody get on that, because I would read it. I think. Okay. So, all right. Well, we've been going for about an hour now. So I guess we'll try doing this a little bit. Oh, not quite, almost there. But I'm curious. We've been very you talked a lot about the negative aspects. I kind of want to hear your thoughts on some of the more positive aspects. So, like for instance, how do we rescue people from the extremists? Is there a path forward to getting people back into sanity land? What do you think?
I don't know. You're asking the one question. So I've been asking the same question on my shows of others as well, because it's clear that I was wrong, not about what should change people's minds, but about what will change people's minds.
Okay.
And we are not good thinkers, and we run on our gut and our feelings, which we all knew. But the suspicion was, if you could just say, here's a fact, we could at least get people to agree on what the facts are, even if they didn't agree on what the correct thing to do about the facts or the justification or reason for the facts. Now, we can't even get people to agree on the facts, in part because I'm just speculating about how we got here. Number one, we told people you can be anything you want. No, you can't. Some of you are not going to be NBA players, and some of you should not be president. But we've told people that. We've also, hey, you know, scientists, we used to prop them up and show, oh, this is what science says. And people are just like, ooh, yay. And now it's like, yeah, I don't care what science keeps changing its mind. No, science keeps honing in on a more accurate understanding of reality. It's not like we're going to find out tomorrow that everything we understood about biological evolution and common ancestry and descent is wrong. We're going to fine tune aspects of it that may be wrong. It's not like, you know, we found a tree out there and tomorrow we're going to find out, you know what? Trees aren't actually natural things. They don't grow from a seed. They're not actually plants. They're actually aliens that were transplanted here by somebody else, and they're primarily, you know, made of silicone. They just have a thing that disguises it. You can make up as absurd a thing as you want. But when you tell people and then you show them that, in fact, if you're dishonest, if you just say that everybody else is wrong and everybody else is bad, you can get to be like Lauren Boebert, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, like almost every cabinet position that Trump has appointed. You can get to run the world. And so we've told people you can be anything you want. And it turns out we were right that you can be anything you want, provided you are rich or have a rich friend. Provided you can make a sufficient enemy out of another category of people. It was, you know, it used to be just gay folks. And now, you know, oh, no, none of us are going after gay folks, but they will.
Right.
You know, Clarence Thomas already signaled this. Is marriage equality going to go away? If a case becomes before the court, it may well go away. Yeah. If, you know, how long is it going to be before some other things change? When you've done that, you've set up a system where people feel like they are just as knowledgeable as everybody else. I've done my own research. No, you haven't. Almost nobody who has ever uttered the phrase, I did my own research, has actually done research. What they mean is, I looked into this, you know, and the information that convinced me was such and such, and here's my new position. But what convinces you is independent from what ought to convince you, which is also perhaps in many cases independent from what is actually true.
Yeah. I think you're right. There's a book I mentioned earlier before we started the show by Sean Otto. It's called The War on Science. Unfortunately, a book is coming out now that is being put together by Lawrence Krauss that is also titled The War on Science, but it's about like woke people are the reason that, you know, science is bad or whatever. So don't buy that one.
Oh, wait, are you suggesting that Krauss is now coming out against woke people just like Dawkins and everybody else? Yeah, imagine that the guys who have inappropriately touched people or been accused of it or have some other problem somewhere. Oh, it's all the woke stuff. The guy who's friends with Epstein. Yeah, it's all woke stuff. Now, without going into what people did, the question that you had asked was, how do we fix this? And what I was saying is, once upon a time, it was, we'll teach people how to think and then give them the fact-based information. Once we give them the tools of critical thinking, of skepticism, when they understand how to put a syllogism together, how to evaluate things, if we could just teach that, then you plug in true premises, true conclusions must come out, and everybody's reasonable. And that's all true, except that that is uninteresting. Literally on last night's show, somebody called in to ask, hey, should we set aside accuracy, basically set aside truth, in order to fight back against misinformation and propaganda? And while I know how appealing that is,
right,
I can't. And it's in part because if you convince someone to give up, let's say, Christianity for bad reasons, if you invent some fictional disproof of God, lie about what the science says about, these things,
right,
then as soon as they find out that they were lied to, not only have they lost their foundation for being out of religion, not only are they more likely to go back, but they go back with ammunition against the opposition. And so I'm not willing to sacrifice the truth or accuracy to do this. I want to continue pushing back and trying to say, and this is what I asked Andrew Seidel last night, what has Trump done that would truly bother his base? So you got to find, and by the way, this isn't just all about Trump. I'm not trying to turn this into just a Trump thing, but I mean, that's the biggest issue right now.
Yeah.
It's what does his base think is happening versus what's actually happening? And how do we get better information to people? Because Fox News and OAN and MSNBC and CNN aren't doing it. Now, I'm not going to do an advertisement for Ground News or any of the other services because they're not paying me.
By the way, Ground News. No, yeah. Speaking of, it's a great time for us to go to our sponsor today, Ground. No, just kidding. No, I think you're right. I do. I think that's a fair point. And that's one of the. First of all, I want to circle back very briefly for a moment. I do think there is a really funny connection between the people who get in trouble for like harassment and then the anti-woke stuff. I think there's a really funny connection there. But also, I 100% agree. I think the media has done a terrible job of accurately relaying the issues that face us in science communication, for instance. And that's one of the three prongs. And we talk about this, and we did a video titled The War on Science, where we go through the three prongs as discussed by Sean Otto. The industrial prong, so how does the fossil fuel industry fund PragerU, Fox News, and so on to say climate change is fake? Then there's the Christian, or Islamic or whatever, the religious angle that is procreationism. And then of course there's the media, which isn't so much the core, like non-crazy media is not like anti-science, but they don't know how to approach science topics correctly. They think, okay, we'll set up a panel, a roundtable discussion where we'll have RFK debate, a regular doctor. And then, they think like, oh, well, we've been balanced. Yeah, we balanced the discussion, right? We had a regular pro-vaccine person and an anti-vax person, and so we balanced the discussion. We did our journalistic duty. And I think that's been...
We showed both sides. Yeah, that's part of the problem is that, and this pretending that both sides are equal or that they need to be equally represented is also a problem. And it's not just there with regard to like the science. It's not like this. The scientists, it's not like biologists and creationists are on equal footing and so they should deserve equal time. I mean, it's just like, we don't need to give flat earthers equal time. I'm engaged. I do debates, all of that. On the political front, when people try to both sides, both sides are bad. You chose genocider B over genocider A. No, even if they were both in favor of genocide, there's 20 other things going on here as well. And I picked the better option. The fact that you decided to sit on your high horse and abstain and say, I won't vote for anybody who's supporting genocide means you're now somebody who's essentially supporting genocide by not doing anything to oppose the status quo. But when you look at the both sides thing when it comes to science, this is why, you get somebody like Rogan who admits he's an idiot who doesn't know anything and thinks he's bringing in people who are smarter than him and people, and because they all are. And
Yeah.
he thinks he's getting accurate information, but he has no capacity to push back on them, because when you don't understand anything, everything is magic and every conspiracy makes sense.
Right.
Yeah, it's also the case that, like, sorry, Matt, but the debates in generally are not a medium to, like, discuss science in detail. Like, for example, like Jackson mentioned how putting RFK Jr. against an average doctor is a bad idea because, for one, RFK Jr. is he's a litigator, right? So he knows how to
Oh
argue
yeah, he's gonna know all the
efficiently.
arguments. Yeah,
And the
exactly.
average doctor does not know how to argue. Like, he knows his stuff or their stuff, but that doesn't matter in a live debate. All that matters is how well you can argue your case, and RFK can do that more effectively than the average doctor. So that's why debates, also going back to Jubilee and such, like it is not productive. So I would say that the way you can convince people is to be personal with them, like not talking down to them, or not just to get them to how do you say it? Just get them to
Just like
understand.
meet them on the same level.
Yeah, I mean, meet them at their level. Like, meet them. First, acknowledge their feelings. Like, sorry, Ben Shapiro, but feelings do matter. So first, acknowledge their feelings, so they won't reject you when you argue against them. That's how I view this.
Yeah.
The problem is that nobody has the time, nor is it possible to do that sort of one-on-one interaction out there with everybody who needs it. There's no mass communication possible that addresses people's personal feelings, except in a broad sense. And when you've got someone who famously said, you could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and people would just cheer him, which is, I'm not going to spoil any TV shows, but there is a TV show that basically did the equivalent of that. And I think it's genuinely true that right now there's virtually nothing. When the old quote from Voltaire sticks in my head, which is when you can get people to believe absurdities, you can get them to commit atrocities. And if there are people who think, I'm the one that's fighting for freedom and free speech, then for some reason, it's really easy to tell them anything that seems to align with that, and they'll just go and do it. Oh, well, I don't know what due process is, but if you didn't use due process coming into this country, you shouldn't get due process going out. Right. And I'm like, that's not what due process is. You have misdefined that just as badly as Chrissy Nome defines habeas corpus. It is bizarre. I wish my phone would stop beeping right now. I'm so sorry.
Idiot guy who's what they call him, like the border whatever. I can't remember what his name is, but yeah, his bit is always did the woman, whatever her name was, who got murdered by this guy, get due process? Like, that's just not what due process is. That's not an area in which due process would be applied. You don't what does that even mean? It's and it is very frustrating. I agree. I did want to one thing. It's funny you mentioned the both sidesism stuff. We actually did a video on this channel titled "A Critique of Both Sidesism" recently, where there's a really good paper by psychologist John T. Jost, and he discusses, I think his paper is titled like "The Dangers of Both Sideology" or something, but I prefer both sidesism. I think it flows a bit better. But in that paper, he goes through a huge list of different like moral and philosophic issues on which people on the left or even at the center are better than people on the right wing. So he talks about like hate crimes, for instance, bullying, like actual terrorism, all this sort of stuff. And he goes through all these. He's like, these issues are they're more likely to be perpetrated by people on the right wing versus people in the center or on the left. And so he goes through that and really, and so we did a video where we kind of went through all of the major conclusions of that paper, because it was sort of the follow up to our here's all this propaganda that the right wing puts out, and it's asymmetric because there's way more of it, and they're way more serious about making propaganda on the right wing. And so then like we kind of debunk these narratives, or we talk about how to identify these narratives, and then like the subsequent video was which political party is better socially, the liberal one, and then the final video of those four was which party is better not just socially but economically, and again it's the liberal party, which is not surprising. Yeah, but your question, what would cause Trump's base to change their mind? I do also agree with you at this point. I've been kind of blackpilled on that. I do think at this point that when Trump said he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue, that a significant portion of his base would still vote for him. I'm sure they'd find a way to be like, oh, the guy he shot was MS-13, so it was a good thing, actually.
Yep. You can tell because it's definitely not Photoshop.
Right. I don't know, did you see the interview he did where he literally thought that
No, I did an entire video about this because
that's great.
I criticized and trash talked other secularists when they said Trump thinks those letters are actually on there. And I said, no, he doesn't. He's not that stupid. Those letters are clearly on there to show what he thinks those tattoos mean.
Right.
And then when the interview came out and he's like, I'll show you the picture. It literally says, I was like, holy shit. I did an entire video called I Was Wrong, that Trump and everyone around him is in fact stupider than I could have ever imagined. And what it's done is it's tempted me to no longer listen charitably and give the benefit of the doubt. And I have to fight against that urge. And I don't have time to, it is wild because you talk about, I mentioned last night on the show, I have numbers from the Congressional Budget Office. And if you look at presidents over the last 50 years or so, Reagan increased the deficit by $74 billion. Bush Sr. increased it by $400 billion. Bush Jr. increased it by $1.5 trillion. And Trump has increased it by $7.8 trillion.
Yes.
Then if you look at Democratic presidents, Clinton reduced the deficit by $236 billion and left us with a surplus.
Yep.
Obama reduced the deficit by $825 billion, and Biden reduced the deficit by $1.4 trillion. So he didn't neither of them quite got to surpluses the way Clinton did, but this is very clear. Now, if you care about the economy, the deficit isn't the only thing to worry about. But when I show those numbers to MAGA Republicans and say, okay, you wanted the non-politician, you wanted the businessman, you wanted this. The stock market's doing terrible. He's enriching his friends. He's taking bribes out of his own mouth. He says Qatar supports terrorism, and now he's taking a $400 million plane from Qatar. And I had a guy on the show last night call in to be like, Trump's the most peaceful and anti-war president ever. And I was like, what's he done on that front? And I'm like, if he tells you that Qatar, whatever, supports terrorism, but now he loves them and they're our friends. And I shit you not, the caller, without missing a beat, said, well, they don't just do terrorism, they do good things too. And I'm like, when I hear that, I want to give up. Like, what is it going to take? Is it going to take civil war? Is it going to take global war? Is it going to take having everything? Do we need a Last of Us zombie apocalypse sort of scenario? Because I don't think that a lot of the people who think they're likely to survive that are actually likely to survive that.
Yeah, I
it's something that I have realized too. Like it's very ironic, but Trump can be accurately described, and also his most hardened followers can be described as being in a postmodern world. This is actually a term that famously is used by Jordan Peterson. But when you look into how postmodernism is described, is you're living in a world where the facts don't matter. It's all about like vibes and whatever narrative you can push in favor of. And that's why the argument constantly changes. Like one good example is the who stormed the Capitol on January 6th. First, it was, at the moment it was the proud
The Patriots.
Patriots, yes.
Yeah.
And then after it went down, then it was like, oh no, they were CIA operatives, or they were the FBI, or they were Antifa.
Well, same for COVID. COVID was the
Yeah.
same thing. It's just a minor cold that barely affects you, while at the same time it is a Chinese developed bioweapons. Like, well, hold on a second. Wait, which is it? It's this terrible bioweapon thing. So yeah, no, I agree.
And it's very difficult to, like, when you are in that world, the facts really don't matter. Like, you can, like, as Matt pointed out, you can point out to something and then the argument changes on the dime.
Mm-hmm.
It's yeah.
There was a paper by Yochai Benkler, I believe it was, in which he talked about that the purpose, and we talked about it in asymmetric propaganda, how the purpose of institutions is to ground discussions in fact. And the whole point of the Trump admin, and really, I mean, it's not just Trump either. It's been Republican admins since Reagan, has been to dismantle a lot of these institutions, right? I mean, you can look back to Reagan calling for the dismantling of like the Department of Education. You can look at, I mean, it's the same story over and over. But the point of, Trump lied about FEMA. He said like, oh, FEMA spent all their money on immigrants, or he says that like, U.S. aid, goes towards like all what he considers like unworthy causes or whatever, and he can just lie about where it goes.
Was it like condoms in
Gaza? Condoms in Gaza, all that sort of stuff. But it's like,
Yeah.
but they have to do that because the jobs of those people in those facilities and those institutions is to provide the facts that are supposed to influence policy. At least that's what Benkler points out. But the Republican apparatus for the last 40, 50 years has been to dismantle all those institutions. And I think that definitely has been helped along by libertarian politics, although deriving from the neoliberal movement of the 1950s. There's a really good book on it, by the way. It's The Big Myth. Although I know we talked about it earlier. Who cares about... If you're interested in reading about history and you're out there, The Big Myth is a really good book. It's by Naomi Oreskes and Eric Conway. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know about the answer to that question of what would cause people in Trump's base change their mind at this point, because it seemed like his numbers were plunging with the tariffs.
Trapped in a world, yeah.
But then, as soon as he released the tariffs on some countries, although kept the 10%, his popularity rebounded on some issues. And
right.
It's
like... there's a way to spend stuff, and wow, there's no way to say this without. This is the hard part. There's no way to say this stuff without sounding arrogant and condescending.
Okay.
If you're stupid and you see, and you don't know how this stuff works, when somebody tells you, oh, this was Trump's brilliant plan, let's jack tariffs up, and yes, we'll lie to the people just a little bit about how much it's going to impact them in the short term, but then they'll be begging to work a deal. We'll lower the tariffs. Things will start to improve. And so it's just growing pains. You'll be fine.
Right.
And no matter how, if there's any slight improvement or uptick, which is naturally going to happen in most cases. Oh yeah, look, he's right. It's brilliant. Genius. And so what the administration's been doing is, let's throw as much shit at the wall as we can. Some of it's going to stick.
Flood the zone.
Of the stuff that doesn't stick, well, some of it we can just blame on Biden.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of it, what we'll do is we'll make things worse. And then when we bring it back to where it was, or as close as we can get, we'll claim that improvement. It's like setting a house on fire so people can see you put it out.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's fair. That's definitely the way that the polls seem to show the tariff thing. Yeah, as we get closer to the earlier, more normal situation, the poll numbers went back up, which is like, it's almost like it's like the like goldfish memory. It's like, don't you remember he was the one who did that? Why are you still in favor of him? And he just did that. I did a lot of reading. I did my own research. Right after Trump got elected, I was kind of grappling with despair, and I was reading a lot of articles on why Trump got reelected, and
Well,
I have some ideas, but
I think it's mainly like if you look at how many people voted in the previous election or in the election from
that was certainly part of it.
Yeah, it's
But
there's a significant dip. Like Trump got more or less the same number of votes as he did in like maybe a little bit more than compared to 2020.
Well, he did get more votes than last time, but in addition to
Yeah.
that, it was also that places that had previously that a lot of places voted more strongly red this time around than they had last time, which means that there was actually shifts in demographics rightward in a lot of places, which is bizarre to me because under Biden, you had like the CHIPS Act, you had the bipartisan infrastructure, you had the American Rescue Plan, you had the Inflation Reduction Act, you had all these, and you had the most like pro-union president since like FDR.
What's the change in absolute numbers or in relative numbers? What's the shift in like?
I think it was relative. I think.
Yeah.
I could be wrong. I have to go back and look at that. It's been a little while.
My suspicion is that for the most part, the same people who voted for Trump in 2020 also voted for Trump in 2024.
Oh, I'm sure you're right on that.
And a lot less people who voted for Biden voted for Harris. That's the main difference that feels to me.
Yes,
it's just the Democrats lost. The Democrats lost most of the votes compared to the former election. That's the main issue. Yeah.
But the thing that I kind of came away with at the end, my hypothesis is just that people just simply have like no memory, no capacity for information retention. Because I don't know how anybody could look at the last 4 years and then look at the 4 years before that and think we need more of the 4 years before that, as opposed to the 4 years.
I got exhausted. The speculation about, why did we lose? And it's been annoying watching Sam Harris and others run around trying to blame trans folks or the woke left or we went too far left or any of that. No. Saying Kamala Harris never mentioned trans people once.
Correct.
Not once. And Tim Walz, good guy, left leaning, runs a great state. I may even move there. He was the most exciting thing on the ticket. And there were people who were like, I don't trust Biden. He's too old. He looks this. But it was the right. They're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats. They're smuggling in drugs. They're coming over to take your jobs. These people don't belong here. They're not us. We're American.
They
was
have
just
bad genes.
Fucking barrage of misinformation and disinformation. And what that does, in addition to misinforming some people, is it makes the people who, I don't like politics. I don't get it. I don't like politics. They now don't want to participate even more than they didn't want to participate before. If nothing else happens, somehow we need to find a way to get to the 30 to 50% of people in the United States who do not participate. And we need to get them to understand politics is everything. You want your rights? That's politics. You want to stand up and make sure that they can't just disappear you to El Salvador? That's politics. You want a woman's right to choose? That's politics. You want LGBTQ equality? That's politics. You want your Social Security check? Do you want roads to be fixed? Do you want infrastructure improvement at all? All of those things are politics. What can you do in your life that isn't impacted by politics? Nothing. Mm-hmm. You don't even own your property or have any rights at all without that.
Yeah.
And we need to get people aware they are undoing this and rebuilding this nation in the image of Project 2025, of a right-wing Christian think tank, of all these other things. And that even those people who think that that's okay with me because I'm a Christian, or that's okay with me because I'm not going to be one of the affected classes, you're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You are going to be worse off financially, healthcare wise, emotionally, with respect to rights and everything. All the fantasy world that these people have built in their head of what it's all, this is what it's all going to be like when we get rid of the woke left. No, it's not going to be like that at all. And if you keep down this path, when you watched Little House on the Prairie, if you looked at that scenario and thought it was idyllic of, hey, oh, wouldn't that be nice? That was hard work, no power, no nothing. It's not this thing that's praiseworthy. And instead of making progress, we're going back to something like that. By the way, I've got thunderstorm warnings, so if I lose power, that's why.
Oh, okay. I think you're right, and I do think that I think the large part of that comes from like incorrect narratives about history also, because I think there are a lot of people who do look at that sort of the libertarians you mentioned earlier, like, yeah, I can hoof it on my own, I can live in the bunker, by myself. Like, no, you can't. But
Yeah.
the idea that that just wayward westward pushing pioneers conquered the United States by themselves, like, no, they didn't. They had the US Army basically remove Native Americans for them to then go out there. Not saying that the pioneers didn't do anything on their own, but they had to, the road basically had to be cleared of native tribes who had lived there for a very long time before they could start going out there towards California and whatnot. And I think the same sort of narrative, like, people forget why people have an idyllic.
But Jackson, the Vikings were here first, right? That's an actual thing now for some reason.
Bizarre. But the narrative of or like, people remember the 50s as being like idyllic, but it's like, why were the 50s idyllic? Well, they were idyllic because for white people anyways, because of these social programs that were instituted by the New Deal, right? So you had like I think was it Truman with the GI Bill? You had like Social Security under FDR. You had all these various programs like rural electrification, all this sort of stuff. You had these very large government apparatus that leveled the playing field more for the people of the U.S. and that allowed them to live, at least white people, to have do what?
Oh, didn't Social Security wasn't that the most successful program that reduced poverty or homelessness?
I think you're.
Especially
I believe you're right.
People, yeah.
Because that was 35, I believe, and then I think 65 was Medicare and Medicaid, if I remember correctly. But these programs, these social programs, built up, right, the white middle class and all this sort of stuff, and then enough time had passed, it seemed, that people could narrativize about like, oh no, the reason that we did so well in this time period had nothing to do with the government at all. It was it was free market fundamentalism. Yes, that's what actually allowed this time to be so good for us, which is why we need to deregulate businesses and industries and let them pollute and all that sort of stuff. At least that seems to be part of it.
I think a lot of people have this kind of, I just realized I'm going to do something history referencing.
Ooh.
I think a lot of people have this citizen Romanus mentality that I'm an American and therefore I'm going to be protected. And as we noted earlier, I'm an American citizen. I'm a veteran, 8.5 years in the United States Navy. I'm a veteran of a foreign war. I can go to the VFW hall. But you know how I became a citizen? I was born here. And if they eliminate birthright citizen, am I still a citizen? Who is a citizen under that scenario? It is bizarre to me, the whole, the leopards aren't going to eat my face. Yes, they are. But what's even more ridiculous is that anybody could even think like that to begin with. because while I'm not, the student of history in the sense of let's categorize and label stuff, we know what's happened. We know what's happened before. And basically the thought is, oh, it could never happen again. I had to, I contacted my, my ex-wife, and we're still really good friends, because she kept telling me, Roe vs. Wade is under attack. And I'm like, yeah, from things like trap laws and limitations and stuff like that, but they're never going to overturn Roe v. Wade. And I called her on the day that it happened to say, I am so sorry for doubting you. I was wrong. I did not think this was possible. And I think that I was being reasonable and should have been right. That should not have been possible. What ended up happening is the Republicans essentially stalled a Supreme Court nomination, and then they stacked the entire court, and then the court decided to throw out precedents and just change stuff. And it is shocking to me how little the world seems to be. Like, if you went, I've said this a dozen times probably, if you went back to me in 2014 and described what was happening today, not only would I not have believed it, I don't know if I could have found anybody who would, on the right or the left. And I'm pretty much convinced that if I said to people in 2014, in 2025, there's going to be a president who's going to be granted incredible power by the Supreme Court, who is going to violate court orders, to ignore court rulings that go against his administration, as he deports people without due process, as he has news organizations threatened with being shut down and having their credentials revoked, and is publicly saying that what they're doing is illegal. If he's going around suing law firms and anybody who stands up against him, if they are firing people, if they are scrubbing language, they've got a list of words that cannot appear on government websites, things like equality
or gay.
Or gay.
They removed, you mentioned that, Jackson, they removed Enola Gay, right? The plane that...
The first dropped, was it Little Boy? But
yeah, if you told any of us, and you asked even the people on the right back in 2014, would you support that? They'd all be like, absolutely not. That's a violation of the Constitution. If you went to the judges and the justices, absolutely not. And instead, now we've got Jeanine Pirro, who hasn't been a judge in 20 years, off Fox News, an appointee. You've got someone who hasn't been a doctor in 20 years practicing is going to be doing this. You've got the RFK Jr. You've got the Fox News drunk host texting people stuff on Signal. And it's like incompetence has become a virtue. And I'm like, I should stop doing the things I'm actually good at and go do the things I'm terrible at. Maybe I'd get paid more.
That's been a recurring joke on our show.
You're living in a meritocracy. Remember that.
We've repeatedly made the joke on this show about like, if I didn't have morals, I could go be a like a televangelist or something. But yeah, I think you're right. I don't know, the reason for that, it does seem to me could be, I don't know if you're familiar with the channel 3 Arrows. It was a German guy. Well, probably not. He does a lot of historical content. But he did a video recently. He did a video a couple years ago called America's Coming Weimar Moment, in which he discussed.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, seen that.
He got a lot of people who asked him, like, hey, is America like on the road to becoming, like 1930s and 40s Germany? And at the time he was like, well, here are some bad things that, we have done. But if we change, this trajectory doesn't really have to happen. And then he just put out a video essentially saying the same exact thing you did. He was like, I could never have foreseen, the insanity that we have gone in just such a short time.
Everything is moving at a lightning speed, like, and paraphrasing his words there.
Yeah. The thing that's so interesting is that, like, I think he mentioned how everything seems inevitable. Like, the next step always seems inevitable, but it isn't. right? It seems like, well, okay, these 10 things happened in the past, and then this 11th thing happened. So it had to happen because these other 10 things happened. It was like it didn't. None of these things ever has to happen. There's always another like chance to fight back, essentially.
I hope so. I mean, I'm at the point now where I wake up kind of daily and have to talk myself out of giving up on all kinds of things and in all kinds of ways. Now, let me first state, I am the beneficiary of 23 buckets of privilege. I'm a cishet white dude from a lower middle class family. I make enough money thanks to, the stuff that I do to at least survive, although I went without health care for 10 years and that led to a triple bypass and other stuff. Although I did go see my doctor a couple weeks ago, and for the first time in my adult life, a doctor said, we're not changing any of your prescriptions because all of your numbers are actually moving in the right direction and look good. So I was like, hooray. And then I shaved my beard off, and now I've got like a turkey waddle thing here that's normally hidden by my beard, and it annoys me every time I see it. But to hell with vanity.
You look great to me.
It'll be gone in a month. It's only for a month. So,
but despite all of that, I'm under attack daily, and I'm under attack from people on the right and people on the left. Because there are people within the community who've decided that being drama mongers and attacking anyone and everyone is what they want to do. And rather than actually investigating and finding out what's going on, they'll just make pronouncements of, oh, this person is bad. This person's a trans. So I am simultaneously a transphobe and in a 4-year relationship with a trans person who's been told that she's dating her oppressor. As I stand up for LGBT rights, and I'm told that I'm gay homie, and consecrate. I only get a fraction of what those other marginalized groups have to go through. So this is not a complaint from me at all, but I don't think people realize that how much of your privilege has to be used for good before it just goes away because you're associated with, oh, you're gay. If I was gay, I'd say I was gay. I wouldn't have a problem. Am I bi? Maybe. Am I pan? Maybe. I don't care. I don't care about the labels, but they want to use it as attack. Just like they used to call into the show and be like, well, you're fat and bald. Yeah, tell me something I don't know. I shaved my head and I know how much I weigh. And now, of course, I'm not quite as fat as I used to be. I've lost like 70 some odd pounds, but, still bald and fucking sexy. So shut up about it. But at the end of the day, it is nothing. I'll tell you what's happened recently, because I called out Dawkins and Harris and Hector Garcia and some others for transphobic stuff. Hector did something that is identical to what my Christian and theistic debate opponents do. This is a really stupid thing that they do. They make it about me. Instead of, I'm going to address atheism or secular humanism, or I'm going to address Matt's arguments, they make it about, I'm going to debate Matt. And this is how I got myself in trouble, because I don't research debate opponents, because I don't want to walk in prepared for the person. I want to walk in prepared for the subject.
Right.
And that's the way I've always looked at it. That is a bit of a mistake, which bit me in the butt with Andrew, because if I'd have known what was going to happen there, I would have never even agreed to do that debate. Wow, there's a gnat in here driving me crazy. But on that front, the gnat has completely destroyed my train of thought. What was I saying?
Andrew, like you were talking about, that you would never debate Andrew if it was.
No, it was before that.
Talking,
that was the sidetrack.
Oh, you're talking about you called out people for.
Oh yeah. Calling the people out. So Hector did some transphobic stuff. I called him out for it, and then he posted a video, which he called "Debunking Matt Dillahunty," not debunking Matt's arguments, but debunking me. And in it, the guy who's engaged in some quasi pseudoscience, because it's Evo psych stuff, decides he's going to psychoanalyze me repeatedly, and then post AI generated memes of some modified version of my face yelling, as if any of this rises to the level of intellectual rigor, as if any of it is a response to any of the science or anything else. And what's embarrassing is that there are scientists and science advocates, guys like Dawkins and Coyne, who are actually actively misrepresenting the scientific facts and other issues surrounding trans rights stuff. And the trans stuff should not even be an issue. We're talking about a tiny percent of the population that doesn't impact anybody. The NAACP said there were 2 trans athletes in collegiate sports. And it's like, this has been turned into such a boogeyman.
Yes.
It has consumed my entire life merely because my partner's trans, which in an ideal world, nobody would know or care about.
Right.
And yet it's become the thing that is all consuming. I would prefer to never have to talk about LGBT stuff again. I'd like to live in the world where, we're kind of post that discussion, but we're not. And so the one thing that the secular community has had to consistently do, and this is why it fits me a little bit, is in order to be able to do debates, I have to have somewhat decent understanding of religions in general, specific religions, specific holy books, philosophy, epistemology, astronomy, astrophysics, biology, psychology, sociology. Now, I'm not an expert in any of this shit, but I know more about most of it than the average person I'm likely to run into debates with. But because you don't know what you're going to get hit with when somebody calls in with a show, they're going to be, I'd like to present the moral argument. And so now you got to load up that part of your brain that knows how to process the moral stuff.
Yes.
And then somebody else is like, okay, well, when that one doesn't work, let's skip to quantum mechanics.
Right.
Okay, let's not. How about you just give me your best argument for God, show why any of us should believe in it. And if you can't do that, you should admit that you are at least doing nothing else with all the other subjects, but stating what your opinion or your preference is. And that puts us at least on even footing, if not making you slightly inferior, especially when science is on my side on the issue.
Yeah, it is funny you say that. That's I don't really do the God debate, but the creationists who we always bring on, our conversations with them are pretty much almost always. It starts off on Twitter. They'll say something about paleontology, or biodiversity or whatever, and then I'm like, okay, that's great. Let's talk about that. And then as soon as we bring them on, the very first and usually only thing they ever want to talk about is like information in the context of genetics. They don't want to talk about anything else. And so the entire conversation becomes an argument about definitions, which is really annoying. Okay. Yeah, that's fair. But yeah, I 100% agree with you on that. So are there any final thoughts that you have? Because we went through all the questions I had. So are there any final points you want to make? Also things you want to shill?
I have nothing to shill. And my final thoughts are that, I appreciate I told you right before we started, I may not have anything at all useful to say. I find myself living in a world that doesn't make sense to me. And while I do have some understanding of a number of different subjects and I try to share what I can, I'm also trying to learn stuff. And what I thought about what would change minds was right in an idealistic sense and wrong in a practical sense. And this is why the question from last night kind of haunts me, because somebody's like, oh, should we suspend truth and accuracy in order to be effective? And I can't knowingly misrepresent reality in order to try to convince people, because there, but for the grace of God, that's what the other side does and all this. I'm actually,
sorry.
I'm actually, we're having discussions, believe it or not, in an abstract sense of at what point does violence become justified? Because it's already happened. I've gotten in fights with people who wanted to run around punching Nazis for their, speech and everything else. And I'm like, no, I'm not punching people for speaking.
Yeah.
What I will do is publicly embarrass the shit out of them and let everybody know. And for example, I've said before, I want cops to be just comfortable enough in their racist views to let us know that they're the racist ones, so we can get those out of there. Because not every cop is a racist. Not every cop is a problem. The all cops are bastards, group. I have huge problems with them. The system is broken, but when you're going to use hyperbole and misinformation, I don't know that you're fixing it. I just think maybe you're setting up for every person who has any capacity to even consider multiple sides of an issue. You're setting it up so that they have less interest in finding out which side might be right. And I'm not claiming that I'm any better than anybody else at it. These are things that I'm discovering about mistakes we've all made. And I don't know what the solution is. Andrew Seidel and I were talking not too long ago that it would not surprise either of us to find out that a civil war is coming, and neither of us know what a civil war would actually look like in this modern era. It's not like, the last one.
Yeah.
And I hope it doesn't happen. I hope we find better solutions. But at this point, we've created a monster of misinformation and not given people a way to get the tools to combat it. And then we've elected an administration that is shutting down the Department of Education. They are shutting down any number of checks and balances. They are going to prevent any hope that I have of making positive change. I'm not giving up yet, but we got to come up with something new.
I agree. I do have to say, I think you had some interesting insights here, and I'm glad that we had you on. So thank you very much for coming on with us today.
My pleasure.
And hope to see you around again in the sphere, the internet sphere. Thank you, Nestling, for joining us always. Thank you, Peter, for hosting, and then thank you everybody in the live chat for watching. And we will see all of you next time. So bye, everybody.